And welcome to another episode of 50 Shades in Grey, where I'm delighted to be joined by Ruth from Mymummyteacher. Ruth, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon, Elliot. I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really pleased I've got you on because we've done a couple of podcasts just recently that I've done, and it's been looking at resilience in kids and how our schooling system is. And I know you're a big advocate of all of these things. So can you just tell us about yourself and how you started and where you've ended up?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you as well. So I was a deputy head teacher by trade. I did a BEd. I was one of those people that as a child, I wanted to be a teacher. I never wanted to do anything else. So went into the system, taught in state schools. And when I had my little boy, so this is 5 years ago now, I requested part-time work. And I was told at that point I could either go back full-time as a deputy head teacher, or I'd have to go back as a class teacher if I wanted part-time. And me being me, I was like, well, I've worked so hard to get to this point, and I'm not going to do that. So I left. And then I started my own business, so MMT Play and Mymummyteacher, which is all about getting children to learn through play. That is my core philosophy. That is what I believe. And it just went from there, essentially. It started in lockdown. I was helping parents because we were all homeschooling at home and nobody had a clue what to do. And they were stressing out, like, I've got this worksheet and I've got this and I've got that. And actually, I was like, but that's not how kids learn. And actually, if you can make it more fun, more engaging for them, it's going to be easier for you and they'll learn more anyway. And it sort of evolved from there. Fast forward 5 years, and the business is well established now. My husband works with me as well, but I have gone one step further in that I've decided to start a campaign for play. We've got a petition to bring play into the curriculum, and all sorts. But that's me in a nutshell.
That's fantastic. So when you was a deputy head, was you trying to get these ideas and philosophies in your school at that time, or was it something that just came to you over lockdown from necessity more than anything?
So I, like, looking back now, I can remember in one of my first teaching posts, I had a head teacher. He was amazing. I didn't realize sort of how amazing he was at the time, but I always remember I wanted to go for promotion. And at this point, I was just a class teacher, and we had a meeting, and he said to me, like, I know you want this, Ruth, but you don't know what your thing is. He's like, if somebody says Ruth Lue-Quee, what do you stand for? Like, what would be your thing that you would lead on, run with, your way of education? And I remember coming out of his meeting, going home to my husband and being like, that's it, I'm resigning. He hates me. I'm going back. So actually, as sort of a mentorship role, it really was true. And he could see that actually at that point, I didn't have my thing. And I found my thing moving between schools. So the first ever school I taught in for me was amazing because I essentially we were really lucky. We had some money, we transformed this outdoor area. I got to teach exactly how I wanted to. The second school, which was under his authority, was a little bit more formal, but it's still very child-centered, very play-based. And I learned so many amazing things there. And then when I did get promotion and I went to a school as a Key Stage 1 phase leader, the way to begin with, it was amazing. I was doing what I had to do. But then we got taken over by an academy and suddenly everything changed. So in my classroom, I always taught Key Stage 1 in early years. So we're talking children that are 4, 5, 6 or 7. I used to have a gorgeous role play area. I had a crafting area. I had, the Play-Doh. I would teach groups of children, their writing, their maths, all of those things, but they had opportunities to be children as well. And then we got taken over by an academy and that all changed. So I can remember the executive head coming in and saying to me, your role play area's got to go. I can remember I had a group of children who were struggling with the maths. They couldn't grasp this concept. So I'd got these children on the floor in a circle. We had some little compare bears and I was showing it them practically. And she walked around and she was like, children shouldn't be on the floor. They should be at their tables, at their desks and doing the same as the others. It sounds like It sounds like a prison that I'm describing, but genuinely, that is how it was. And that for me was the moment when I realised this isn't the way. And I became so passionate about what the way was. And I was fighting for it in my school. And it all sort of tied in at the same point that when I wanted part time, I couldn't get part time, I left. And then I was free to actually shout about it and tell the world how it should be. And, some schools are incredible and they fully align with my ethos and they're amazing. But there are so many schools that take this top-down approach to education. So we're expecting our youngest children to learn in a way that just isn't right for them, that comes from like a secondary school way of learning, which I think they should have more play-based learning as well. But that's a conversation for another day. And they try and force it onto our younger children. So that's a little bit about the moment when I realised this is how it should be and why I became more passionate and having my own children and doing it with them and seeing the impact that it has on children as well.
I had this thought the other day, actually, because I was thinking about how the world has changed. I think we said this on the last podcast. Is it how the world has changed so much, and schools had hardly changed at all. I mean, the curriculum's changed, and saying that the curriculum's gone in a full circle about 3 times, where they'll have a new initiative, they'll get rid of the new initiative, and then 10 years later they're back to that same one again. And I did think like how children have changed. But then I was thinking, have children actually changed, or were we just able to enforce it a lot easier 20, 30 years ago? Because I've as many people, I'm obviously older than you are, but I remember like teachers had much more authority when they was at school. There was the classic, they were throwing ball rubbers still in those days, and there was the cane, and there was like the discipline was almost bordering on medieval. So I think children were kept down all the time. But I don't think kids have changed so much in terms of play. It's just because parenting has changed now, and we're more aware of, certain things that you can't do now with kids. I think parents are more resilient to sort of standing up to it and going, well, that's not right, so we're not going to have that for our kids. So the way the schools are working now, I don't think the kids have changed, but the schools just haven't adapted, I don't think. And I don't know how you've found that working in the schools.
I completely agree. So from my standpoint, I always look back to Dr. Mary Sheridan's work that she did in the 70s, which was sort of the pioneering work around child development. And she came up with developmental milestones and what children should be able to do and all those sorts of things. And child development hasn't changed. Like, our children are not wired in a different way because we're in 2025 to when we were in the 1970s. But what has changed is the world around our children, and that's changed dramatically. So there's so many different things that have come into play here. We're in a digital world now. Both parents in most households have to work. So not only are we juggling full-time jobs or businesses or whatever it is we're doing, we're expected to like parent as if we don't work and work as if we don't parent. That has an impact on the time that we can spend with our children. And like I said previously, like, children are so used to this digital world, and there's a lot of things that are going on. When I think about play, there's loads of statistics that show they're having less free play. So, back then children would go off, they'd roam, they'd do what they want.
Yeah.
We literally wrap them in cotton wool now, and we don't allow them to have that, which is such a key part of growing up. Like, it is a key part of growing up. Like, as a teenager, you have to have that time and that freedom to test boundaries, to learn, to find out who you are, to question things, to be curious. And they have less and less of that. And our schools sort of remain rigid. We're teaching them things that are like, is this the right thing that they need to learn? Or is this just what we teach because that's what it says we have to teach? I always refer to the example of like GCSE food tech. So I did my GCSEs, I don't know, something like 16 years ago. Maths wasn't my strong point. That might be wrong. But I did GCSE food. I'm the world's most awful cook. If it wasn't for my husband and my family, I'd probably starve or live off beans on toast. But I got an A in my GCSE food tech because all I had to do was take one product and change something about the design. So I chose a lemon meringue pie. So like one week I had to cook a lemon meringue pie, and then the next week I did like an orange meringue pie, and then the week after that I did a blueberry one, because you just had to tweak the design, and I got an A. But I hadn't actually learned skills that would support me in the real life. Like, it would have been so much better to learn how to budget or cook family meals that are nutritious and not expensive, or how to do a Sunday roast, or how to go off to uni and survive off £10 a week. These are the things that our kids need to learn, and yet we're teaching them like how to cook a lemon meringue pie. And I put that on my socials, and so many people replied to me, and they were like, "Oh my God, I did the same. And I cooked gingerbreads like one day after, 1 week after the next." And yeah, I just think our curriculum in 2014, when it got changed the last time, they made everything a little bit harder as well. So for children in year one, they then had to achieve objectives that were previously for year two. Year three went down to year two, so on and so forth. But it goes back to my initial point that our children haven't changed. So we've put more pressure on them, we've put more pressure on their teachers, we've set targets that aren't really developmentally attainable. We're trying to get them to pass these tests. We're teaching them in a way that's a little bit random and isn't particularly life skills or things that are going to help them in
Yeah.
life. And then we're expecting them to thrive and develop when they haven't got free time. They're not being allowed to play. Loads of schools like reduce their play times, and then they've got social media, they've got the digital world. Throw that all in, and it's no wonder that we are in a system right now that is failing so many children in the system. And it literally is like home education is increased by 21% from just last year, and it continues to increase and increase because lots of parents are seeing that actually that rigid one size fits all system isn't right for my child, especially children that have got special educational needs as well.
And I'm finding in schools now that there seem to be more and more children with special educational needs within the schools. They seem to, and whether they've increased or they're just recognised a lot better than they used to be. So now we're having, students now that have like movement break cards that can sort of go out. But the way that it's structured is, for me, I think it should be the same for everybody. I think everyone should have the time if they need it, or have the option at least to do it. Because I always find that with, I'll see there'll be a sort of 2 or 3 children out in the playground having a movement break, and I can see in the classrooms a few of the other kids looking at her thinking, what's going on here? Why am I in here? And they're out there having a great time. So I don't know about you now, but do you find that a lot of the special educational needs learning is probably more adaptable for a lot more of the children than just the ones that are identified as having special educational needs?
Yeah, so I truly believe what's essential for some children, so our children with additional needs, is beneficial for all children. And I honestly believe, age appropriately, if these things were just there, if this was how we taught, if this was part of our practice, so many more children would thrive. And it's sort of this authoritarian, you have to sit at a desk, you have to listen, you have to do things in a certain way. But why do we? If children need to move more, why can't we go and do something different? Why can't we put those movement breaks in? I went into a school last week. It was a Steiner school. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they are an alternative education. So they're not your typical British English education. And I first turned up, and the children, they were year 9, they were just on the grass at the front, and they were all there, and they had this big skipping rope. So the children were like all learning to like skip through the rope as a class, and it was amazing. And I said to the head teacher, I was like, is that what they always do? And she said, we like to thread movement through all of our lessons. It's part of how we learn. So all of them had that, and then they'd still be learning and talking about whatever it is they've got to learn, this and that, but it just wasn't that it has to be done in this way at this time because that's how
Yeah.
we've always done it. It's starting to question, actually, if there is a better way, then why don't we do that way? And, as adults, we've all been there where we've gone on training courses and you sit there and someone whacks a PowerPoint up and then they just talk through the slides and you're literally like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
I'm so bored right now. But you don't need a PowerPoint to teach a lesson. If we are like truly honest with ourselves as teachers, I could teach you anything without I don't need a PowerPoint to teach you. It's just the way it's gone that we are so reliant on that we need these things. But there's alternative ways where we can get movement in and joy and play and creativity age appropriately that I talk about. My background's like birth to 8 years old. Yours are obviously older, but I see that we could do that in secondary as well.
Yeah, I'm very lucky with the subject that I teach because it's all movement based, so it's all practical. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why kids seem to love PE at school so much, for the most part, because it's just a chance to get outside and make noise and be loud and scream at other people and throw things and kick things and roll around on mats and all the things that they love doing. I think that's one of the reasons why, yeah, I'm lucky with my subject. But going back to what you said about back, like you said, in the 70s, I felt like we were training kids to do what they would probably have done when they left school. So, when everyone left school, they sat at a desk and they just sat there and worked. These black and white pictures of people just in banks. So it was like, this is going to be your life. So you need to get used to it. You wear a shirt and tie. But the workplace has totally changed now. I speak to my friends that work in London, and none of them have got desks anymore because they know that adults don't want to sit down all day either. So they're all walking around the office. It's got a lot more relaxed. No one wears suits really anymore. It's a lot more casual. They're working from home. But we've still got kids sitting at desks. And that's not all the teachers. I think there are lots of teachers that try and do things differently. But did you find in the school that, like you mentioned about the academy, was it very restrictive of how you had to teach and the results that you had to get?
Yeah. So again, I've been in that position. I have been that teacher that when the changes came in and it suddenly went from I had autonomy, I could teach how I knew was best. Because again, each teacher has a style. If you can teach in your style, you've got your spark, you're going to be delivering the best absolute lesson that you can. So I went from that and having my sparkle and the way that I could do it to suddenly it has to be done that way. This is the way it's done. It was very rigid. I didn't agree with it at all. And I remember coming home and saying to my husband, in my heart, like I genuinely feel torn because this isn't what I believe in. This isn't how I want to teach my 5-year-olds or my 6-year-olds, but this is what I have to do because that's my job and that's what pays me and that's what pays for my mortgage and my bills. And it was really that was a really difficult time because it is so hard being a teacher anyway. Like I always, even now I say that I'm like, it's the most relentless job that there is. Like that kids are just, especially like whatever age, there's different demands. But when you are then forced to do things in a way that you don't believe in as well, it makes it even harder because you've got that internal battle. And not every school is like that. There are some schools where they've got visionary head teachers and they do have the freedom and the autonomy and they trust teachers to just teach and that's that. But unfortunately, the reality is there are many schools where this standard is set at the top. This is the way it has to be. One person has decided that is how children should learn. And that's what they want to do. And they've got that big pressure on, they need to hit this target for their data. And that's one thing I always bang on about is I believe that children are more than data.
Mm.
If I was the powers that be and I could assess children, I'd look at progress because every child is different. Children develop differently. But as long as you're making progress, that's the main thing that we want. And there's that little saying, isn't there, where everyone can achieve, but if you judge them all by their ability to climb a tree, and then there's like a picture of an elephant and a fish and a kangaroo, and they're never going to be able to all climb that tree. The one person will, the one animal will that fits the box, and the monkey maybe, but no one else, nobody else will. It's really, really difficult when you are having to do things. There's amazing teachers that do the best that they can in their situation. There's some amazing schools that can do it, but it is a genuine thing that so many are in this system that will tell you it's broken. We've got budgets are absolutely squeezed at the moment. You've got classes that are at complete full capacity. In my last class, I had a class of 32. We were in Key Stage 1. I had some very complex additional needs. I had children that were English as an additional language. I had children that had severe mental health issues because they had bereavements, and so many things. I can think of kids that didn't have breakfast. It's a sad reality. The reality so many of our children do actually go through, and they come to school every single day, and we're expecting them to get to the same place, whereas really we want schools to be a place of joy, of happiness, of celebrating every single talent, not just your academic ones, not just your maths and your English, because we need to pass the SATs test, but actually giving the same value to the arts, to the sports, to drama. And these are the things that get squashed when we just focus on getting that score. I'm talking about SATs again now. That's where all my experience is primary. And who is that for? Because that is not for the children. That is purely for the school to be able to say, this is where we're at.
Yeah.
What have you done to that child to get that child there? That's my issue.
See, on that data, I'm all for the data as long as it's useful and used. But I don't know of any case where, because it's not for the kid. That data is not about the kid. That's for a school or because I don't know of any case where they've gone, okay, well, let's look back and see where little Johnny's sort of fallen down because he got this last year, he got this the year before. Maybe it's never used for individual kids. It always just seems to be used at the end of the year, and you'll be able to tell me better, that the teacher will run around like headless chickens trying to get all this data together because it's all got to be accumulated and sent in. And then they just post the score and give it in to the person that's accumulating the scores. And then they just move on. They get the next class in. So, and then that kid goes to someone else and it all happens again. But no, the data, it never seems to be used for an individual child. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I, again, as a teacher, I can tell you where every single child is in my class. I don't need to put them through a formal assessment at the age of 5, 6, 7, 8, even 11 for me to tell you. Before they've even put their name on that paper, I can tell you where they'll rank. If that's what you want to know. I've taught them, I know this, but we don't trust our teachers. We have to have this system that takes us away from meeting children where they're at. It's why we've got so many children with gaps as well, because they're taught to pass their SATs test, but then they've got really crucial things that are missing because they've spent so much time on that. And I heard a horror story the other day. We're talking about the phonics test. So that's one that happens in year 1. So these children are 6 or 5. So some of them will have literally just turned 6 when they have to sit this. And what they have to do is read a list of words. Some of them are real words. Some of them are what we call alien words, which basically means they're made up. Now, if you use phonics and that's the approach that you use as a child to read, you'll be able to decode. So work out what the word says and say the word, whatever the word is the theory. But I had a parent message me who said her child had been able to read fluently for years, and she'd never really got on with a phonics approach though. So I know now that child 100% just has a whole word approach to reading. So her brain works in the way that she sees a word, she knows what that word says, and she's been read to enough that she recognises so many words now. But it meant even though she was this amazing reader, she kept failing her phonics test because it's testing a skill that isn't how she works. And she was saying that the school was sending home all of this homework and she was in interventions for something I would argue she doesn't need to be able to use that if she can read using a whole word approach, but she doesn't fit in that box. So she'd bring the data down. So they have to like pedal this thing for her to get there. But all that energy and time could have been spent on developing her comprehension or developing like her love of reading more. Or this is my argument, and this is what I think we're assessing children for. What is it for?
My son left school. Well, he's just finished university last year, but I remember when he was coming through his GCSEs, what they were doing. I know they were doing like 10, 11 GCSEs. So they was learning so much stuff. And about 2 weeks after he'd finished them, he said to me, I think I've probably forgot 85% of what I learned at school already. He said, he said, I just have. You know, lots of it was completely useless. I'm never using it again. And I understand we have to do science and we have to do all these things. And, you know, we're still teaching history where we're still teaching about the Tudors, even though I did that for my history when I was at school. So apparently there's been no history that's actually happened recently because we're still doing the Tudors and Henry VIII, which I know is, it's important, but I don't know where this is helping kids when they leave school. I'm sure if I spoke to most of my peers now, most of them, unless they've got a particular interest in history, they would have forgotten all of it and they've probably never used it again. And I just think now with the curriculum, it needs to be something that's useful because, like it or not, as you say, kids are spending more and more time in a digital world. But that's where we are. It doesn't matter if we do or don't like it. They're in a digital world. Everything is going to be digital. So when I watch, probably the same as you'd be sitting on a train and I'll watch 5, 6-year-olds now with their thumbs on their mum's phone. And it's incredible. It's just different skills that they're learning. So you kind of have to, I feel like you kind of have to embrace that and go with that. And I know a lot more schools now are using iPads and they're doing a lot more stuff on iPads. But with what you're doing now, because you said you've got a company that's also making tools and making games, is that right?
Yeah, so we help parents and professionals as well to set up learning activities that are in a playful way. So it's all, it doesn't matter what your objective is on the curriculum, we can teach that in a practical, active, playful way, as opposed to here's a worksheet, sit at a table and do that.
Yeah.
So the learning through play cards that we sell, I've got a freebie that I can give you guys. We can pop that in the show notes as well. You can access them, and that's what they're designed to do. It's to help parents to be able to help their children learn in a way that we know is best and that our children need. Because you're absolutely right what you're saying as well about the digital world. And I was reflecting on this the other day because, as a teacher, when I was in the classroom, actually, we were sort of riding the wave of digital coming in. Like, I can remember when we all switched from whiteboards to interactive whiteboards, and that was the thing that we had all the time. But my worry is on young children, their brains are still developing. There is so much research out there that shows us too much exposure to that screen does prohibit, and it can be damaging for their development. And as a school setting, I feel like we've got to the point now where we need to say, well, when are these children having a break from the screens? Because if they are on their screens before school, which most children are, they'll either watch television or they'll be on their iPads, or if they're a teenager, they're checking, from the moment they wake up, they will get their phone out, see what's happened. Then they're going into school, and in school, they've got an iPad each. I know schools that even in reception in year 1, every single child has their own iPad and they do learning on that. So these are 5-year-olds, some of them are 4. Then they come home, and then when they get home, they're straight back onto their own personal tech again. When are they actually having a break? And I think, like, our schools for our young children, actually, maybe we need to say, maybe we've gone a little bit far and we need to be that space that can protect that screen-free time.
Yeah.
If we can't do it in a school where the children are, how can we expect children to like take themselves away from it in society? They're not going to do that. I mean, they don't have the impulse control for a start. I don't have the impulse control as a fully grown adult. Like, I pick up my phone. It is wild
Yeah.
how addictive they are. Like, I consciously have to be like, right, I'm putting that away. But I've got the skills as an adult who can regulate, who can monitor myself, who understands the effects to tell myself to do that. A 13, 14, 15, 16, 10, 11-year-old, I mean, there's kids younger than that have phones, don't have that. And then obviously that's where parenting comes in and modeling all of that. But if you're going to a school that constantly uses tech as well, I don't know. I just feel like I was all for tech in schools when it first came around. This is the revolution. This is what we need. This is the world they're growing up in. But I do feel a little bit like now, actually, oh my goodness, when are these kids having a break? If it's
Yeah.
so tech heavy in that school building as well. And for young children, it is that effect on their brain when they're growing up.
So what results, if so, with what you're doing now, and not talking about data, but I'm sure people will look at what you do and go, okay, but what results are you seeing compared to when they're not doing that? So how do you gauge what you're doing is a success or not?
So in terms of how we support parents through our products, it's the connection, it's the bonding, it's giving parents those ideas of things to do, because I admit myself, it's overwhelming, it's extremely tiring being a parent and or a caregiver, and being at work and then coming home and then thinking, oh, I need to do this now. Like, we've all been guilty of like, here, turn the telly on, here, watch this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so we are able to give parents those ideas and that inspiration of like, you can just set this up. It literally takes 2 minutes and your little one will have fun with it. They'll be able to play with it and they can use their imagination. So I'm just thinking like one of the activities I think it's in the 6 months plus pack, because they go from birth to 8, is literally like a colander and pipe cleaners, and you shove it in. And obviously, like for the younger one, it's their fine motor skills. You can do colours, they're pulling out as a bit of fun. But actually, like with my older little boy, when he's done that, he's found that, and then that's become like a space hat, or he's like used it like a car. And actually, if I hadn't got that out for him and provided that, he wouldn't have had the tools for his imagination to go. And it's showing you don't need to go and buy expensive toys. You don't need to spend a fortune on them. And actually, the most expensive toys I have bought him, he plays with for a second and then he doesn't really play with them again, because they do one thing and one thing only. You can press a button and this happens. But the open-ended resources that we have around ourselves, if we give our children opportunities to use their imagination, that children need, and that's what we don't give them. We try and squash children into becoming this box that society wants. But children crave more than that, and that impacts their mental health, it impacts their well-being, and then they will learn better. Like, so many parents message me and they're like, oh, we had that homework and they were really struggling to do it, and then we did one of the activities from like a 5+ pack, and perhaps it was addition, and suddenly they got it because it was a game and it was fun. That's what makes the difference. And yeah, I've put a petition into the government. It's not yet out, but hopefully it will be soon.
Wow.
For play to become statutory as part of the curriculum within Key Stage 1. Because in England and Scotland, in Wales and Scotland, it is, and our children are no different. But in England, unless you are in a school that prioritises that, Year 1 is very formal. It's the gap. You get your early years, which is playful, and then you go to Year 1, and it's not the same. There's some that are, but most of them aren't. But our kids are no different. Like, research shows us time and time again that children learn best when it's in a playful way. So my business helps parents with the ideas to do that. And yeah, it's great.
So do you provide sort of products for this as well, Ruth, or is it just literally, like you say, like the colander idea? Because that seems like a throwback to sort of years ago, seeing kids run around with like the metal colanders on their head, pretending to be aliens. So do you provide sort of products, or is it just like the ideas for what parents can do with their children?
So through MMT Play, we provide the ideas. So it's a physical pack of cards, but you can get the digital version as well. It is aligned to the curriculum, and that gives you the ideas of literally using items around the home, what you can set up for your child to play. And then we have workshops as well that parents can purchase, and it talks you through. It's basically me like telling you this is what you can do, and this will help you to help your child. And then I do go into schools as well, and I work with other businesses and corporate brands that want to get that playful learning in. And I do think it's a movement. I think more people are they're becoming aware of it. They're looking at their children and like, surely this isn't how it needs to be. Like, our childhoods were joyful. They were full of all of these things. And actually, the children that are growing up now have the same experiences that we have, or for all the things that we've mentioned, like the reduction in free play, the digital world coming in, the focus on assessments and getting children to hit these scores, have we actually forgotten what childhood is? And are we keeping that away from our children?
So one of my last questions, because you've mentioned it a couple of times now, and I know from speaking to teachers and parents as well, it's the bane of a lot of people's life, is homework.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's your view on homework, as it was? Because a lot of the times they are just worksheets, aren't they, that the kids will take home. And it seems they either take far too long or they're kind of pointless. So, have you got a view on what homework should look like, if it should even be given at all?
Yeah, I do have a view on this. You won't be surprised to know. So I don't think we should have homework. I don't think we should have forced homework. So again, different ages, I would take a different approach. When children are very young, I think what we should be doing is encouraging them to read as much as they can. I think we should be encouraging them to play. I think we should be encouraging them to get involved in like a club, those sorts of things, because that to me is homework. If we go back to like the famous quote, like, play is the work of childhood, they need that time to do those things, to do their sports group or go to their arts group. And I know not every child it comes from a family where that's going to be possible, but actually just allowing them to rest as well, like, that is so important. Can you imagine if you were at work all day, and then I know some people do have to do this, but not everybody does, and then you get home and then it's like, now I've got to sit and do this much work again. Like, you're an adult and we would find that hard, unless it's something that you really enjoy. Like, if you love your job, if you're doing something that means something to you and you can see that, then you'd happily do that. But actually, if you're going to work and you're doing it, say, for example, I don't know, the history we were talking about, the Tudors, you don't really enjoy it that much, but now I've got this worksheet to do it. I'm not going to want to do it. Quite often it can cause a battle at home, because parents, most of us as parents, we want to do the right thing. We don't want to do the wrong thing. This is an authority telling us your child has to do their homework. You don't want your child to get into trouble. So you're going to encourage them to do it because that is the law, essentially the rule in that school. So it can cause friction between families. It can be very difficult for them to do. And I just think children need time away from school to be children, to rest, to play, to follow their interests, to spend time delving into what it is they enjoy. And I really think as well, there's this misconception that time in a school building equates to how much you'll learn, as in like, okay, so you're there from 9 till 3, so you're going to learn so much because you're there from 9 till 3. It's just not the case. Like, there's so many things that happen in a school day that can like fall, children don't learn for 6 hours. They don't need to learn for that many hours. I would argue that like an hour or two of really condensed focused learning time is more and would do the job as much as like sitting there for 6 hours and plowing them through stuff that doesn't really make sense to them. And then we don't need to do it at home as well. I would say ban the homework, but my child gets homework and I I'm that person that's like, I don't want to do the wrong thing. So I've spoken to his class teacher and I've always said, like, if you present it as a worksheet, I might do it differently. So he gets his spellings, and I will sometimes like put the letters on post-it notes, stick them around the room. I'm like, right, go and find the words and then come and spell it for me. So I had to get him to sit there with his pencil at his desk when all he wants to do is kick his ball around in the garden.
Yeah.
Or I'll do it in the car, or we'll sing silly rhymes about it. And I'll help him to learn, but in a different way. But I've got those skills, and that's what I aim to do, to help parents to do that in a way that's playful. But I just think it's unnecessary. I think if you've gone to school for 6 hours and you haven't learned enough in those 6 hours, then there's a problem with the school, because that extra bit at home is where you should rest and play and be able to follow your own interests. And any homework that is given at like an older age or younger should be project led and should be like tailored to our children's interests and supporting them to like teaching them the skills of researching, teaching them the skills of, if you're interested in this, go and find out more about it. That is so much more valuable than making them do a worksheet for what? I don't know. Controversial, maybe.
It's been great talking to you, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And you have an infectious love for what you do as well, which is always great. I just wanted to thank you for coming on, and we'll put the link for the freebie in the show notes as well, so that you can contact Ruth, and she'll be tagged into everything, so you can follow Ruth as well and all the stuff that she does, and hopefully that will help you as well. Ruth, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for joining me on 50 Shades of Grey. I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, it's been lovely. It's been so nice to chat to you. I hope I haven't turned grey just yet. I'm holding on for that a little bit longer.
And I wish you all the best of luck with everything you're doing, because so much of it makes sense to me as well. And like I said, I've been doing this job a long time, so I think it's time for a change. So we'll put all of your stuff into, like we said, our show notes, and once your petition's out, I'm sure we can all jump on that as well. But thank you for joining me. Guys, thank you for joining 50 Shades of Grey. Make sure you subscribe and follow, and we'll catch up with you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.